My ex-husband invited me to his wedding, then leaned close and whispered, "Don't let me marry her." Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and don't forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved ones. My name is Lorraine Whitfield. I'm 36 years old, and 2 years ago, my life was torn apart by the man I thought I would grow old with. His name is Callum Rhodes. If you met him, you might think he was the perfect gentleman. Handsome, confident, charming in a way that made people fall into his orbit. That was the same charm that pulled me in when I was young and hopeful. Back then, I thought I was lucky. But behind the easy smile and smooth words, Callum was selfish, manipulative, and a liar. We had been together for over a decade, and I had given him everything. I put my career aside to help him chase his dreams, worked long hours to keep us afloat, and stood by him when his business nearly collapsed. And what did I get in return? Betrayal. He cheated on me with a woman named Marissa Caldwell, a woman with a family fortune big enough to smooth over every rough edge of his messy life. When I found out, I thought the worst part was the cheating itself. I was wrong. The worst part came later, when he handed me divorce papers out of the blue, cold and final, like all those years together meant nothing. After that, I cut him out completely. I didn't call, didn't text, didn't stalk his life from the sidelines. I tried to rebuild my world from the ashes he left me in. So when a cream-colored envelope showed up in my mailbox with his name embossed in gold, I nearly laughed. An invitation. To his wedding. The man who destroyed me wanted me there to watch him promise forever to someone else. I should have burned it. I should have thrown it away and never thought about it again. But curiosity is a cruel thing. Maybe it was anger too, the kind that never really fades. Maybe I just wanted to look him in the eye and remind him I was still standing. Whatever the reason, I said yes. The estate where the wedding was set was straight out of a magazine. Rolling lawns, marble floors, chandeliers glowing like stars. It was all too polished, too perfect, just like the life he wanted people to believe he had. Guests looked at me like I was a ghost, whispers following me as I walked past. Callum pretended not to notice, but I caught his eyes on me again and again. That night at the rehearsal dinner, when the wine was flowing and everyone was laughing a little too hard, he leaned close to me, close enough that I could smell the cologne I once loved on his skin. His voice was low, desperate, almost trembling as he whispered words I never expected to hear. "Don't let me marry her." And in that moment, I realized this was not just a wedding. It was something darker, something broken. And somehow, I was standing right in the middle of it. I met Callum when I was 19, sitting on the steps outside a crowded lecture hall with a sketchbook in my lap. He dropped his notebook, and when I handed it back, he flashed the kind of grin that made you feel like the only person in the world. We were inseparable within weeks. By the time graduation came, people called us the couple that would last forever. We believed it too. Marriage came quickly. We didn't have much, but we had each other, or so I thought. He was ambitious, always talking about building his own business, being his own boss. I wanted to design spaces, create beauty out of empty rooms, but I put that aside to help him. I worked extra hours at a furniture store while he poured himself into his startup. I told myself it was temporary, that one day he'd succeed, and then I could chase my dreams. For a while, things looked promising. He had the right words, the right smile, and people seemed to believe in him. But behind closed doors, the man I loved grew harder to recognize. Small lies slipped into our conversations, excuses that didn't make sense, nights he didn't come home until late. At first, I ignored the signs, convincing myself it was just stress. Then came the truth. Her name was Marissa Caldwell. I learned about her before he ever admitted it. A lawyer's daughter with a trust fund big enough to erase all of his failures. When I confronted him, he didn't even deny it. He just looked at me like I was an obstacle he had outgrown. I never imagined betrayal could cut so deep. It wasn't only that he had chosen someone else. It was the way he discarded everything we had built together. Years of love, sacrifices, loyalty, all thrown aside like they were nothing. He filed for divorce without hesitation, leaving me buried in debts from loans I'd signed to help his dream survive. While he walked into a new life, polished and protected by Marissa's money, I was left piecing myself back together with empty hands. Friends told me I was better off without him, but they didn't see the wreckage he left behind. They didn't feel the weight of nights staring at bills I couldn't pay, or the bitterness of knowing the man I gave my best years to had chosen wealth and convenience over me. That was the beginning of my resentment, not just toward him but toward myself. I had given him every part of me, and in the end, he walked away richer while I was left hollow. The scars of those years never healed properly. And when I found myself standing in front of him again at that wedding, I wasn't just looking at an ex-husband. I was staring at the living proof of every bad choice I ever made. The wedding weekend began with a long drive through winding country roads that felt like they were leading me into another world. At the end of the gravel path, the estate rose out of the hills like something from a glossy magazine. The house was sprawling, with white columns and wide balconies, its windows glowing like it was already celebrating. Every blade of grass on the ground seemed carefully trimmed, the gardens bursting with roses and orchids that looked too perfect to be real. Even the air smelled expensive, like polished wood and cut flowers. It wasn't just a wedding venue, it was a statement, one that screamed of wealth and status. I stepped inside and was greeted by a sea of chandeliers hanging high above marble floors that gleamed under the soft light. Every detail seemed staged, like a show Callum wanted the world to see. He was always desperate for validation, and this place carried his fingerprints all over it. It wasn't about love or intimacy. It was about proving he had made it. From the moment I walked in, I could feel the eyes on me. Quiet conversations died down as I passed, replaced with murmurs I wasn't meant to hear. Some people recognized me, though it had been years since I'd been part of this circle. Others only knew me by reputation, the ex-wife. I felt their glances like cold drafts against my skin. They didn't smile. They didn't welcome me. They looked at me like I had wandered into a space where I no longer belonged. Marissa's family was the coldest of all. They moved around me like I was invisible, their polite expressions masking sharp disdain. When I tried to greet one of them, I was met with a stiff nod and eyes that slid past me like I was a server carrying trays instead of a guest. I wasn't part of their story. To them, I was just an inconvenient reminder that Callum had lived another life before this perfect one. But he noticed me. Oh, he noticed me. From across the room, his gaze found mine again and again. He smiled the same way he always had, that sly curve of his lips that could look tender or mocking depending on the moment. This time, it was uneasy, almost forced, like he was trying to hold something together that was already falling apart. He didn't speak to me then, not in front of everyone, but his attention was constant, heavy, like an invisible hand gripping my shoulder. And all the while, in the back of my mind, the memory of his whisper from the night before repeated itself. "Don't let me marry her." The words played on a loop, tangled with the sight of him standing proudly in his tailored suit, pretending to be the groom everyone expected. It was a secret no one else could hear, a plea buried beneath all the laughter and clinking glasses. I couldn't tell if it was madness or truth, but I knew it had changed everything. I waited until the crowd thinned before I approached him. He was standing near the terrace, nursing a drink, his tie loosened as though the air around him was too heavy. I stepped closer, and his smile vanished. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I asked the question that had been burning inside me since his whisper. "Why?" He glanced around as if someone might be listening, then lowered his voice. "You don't understand, Lorraine. She isn't who she pretends to be. Marissa isn't gentle or kind like she looks. She's controlling. She wants every part of my life under her thumb. If I marry her, I'll be trapped forever." I almost laughed at the desperation in his tone. This was the same man who once swore he wanted nothing more than to be by her side. Now he was telling me she was dangerous, that she had lured him in only to hold him hostage with her money and her name. He said she didn't love him. She loved what he could become for her. Then came the words that twisted in my stomach. "I never stopped loving you, Lorraine. I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. But deep down, I never let you go. That's why I need you to help me." I stared at him, trying to see if he believed what he was saying or if this was just another performance. His eyes looked wet, his hands shook slightly as he reached for mine. The old part of me, the woman who once would have given anything to hear those words, felt a sharp pull. But stronger than that was the disgust rising inside me. He wanted to drag me back into his storm, to make me the one to clean up the mess he had created. I pulled my hand away. "Help you? After everything you did to me? After the way you left me standing in ruins while you ran to her? You think I'm going to save you now?" His face twisted with panic. He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a whisper meant only for me. "Please, Lorraine. You don't know what she's capable of. She'll destroy me. I need you." That was when I felt it clearly. This wasn't about love, and it never had been. This was about him refusing to live with the choices he made. He wasn't afraid of Marissa. He was afraid of losing control. He wanted me to be his escape hatch, his safety net, the way I had always been. I straightened, looked him in the eye, and let the truth spill out. You built this prison, Callum, and you deserve every locked door inside it. Then I walked away, leaving him standing there with his desperation echoing in the night. That night, I couldn't rest. His words clung to me like smoke, impossible to wash away. Part of me still ached with the memory of who he once was, the man I had loved so fiercely. Another part recoiled, remembering every cut he left behind. I hated that I could still feel the pull of his voice, the familiar way he looked at me, as if time hadn't turned us into enemies. I hated even more that some buried piece of me still answered. I was standing near the long corridor lined with mirrors when Marissa found me. She walked with quiet confidence, her gown sweeping against the floor, her jewelry catching the light like it had been chosen to blind. She stopped in front of me, her smile tight and cold. "I hope you enjoy your stay," she said, her voice sweet on the surface but edged with steel. "But let's keep things simple. This weekend is about me and Callum, not the past. I expect you'll respect that." It was a warning, not a request. I kept my expression calm, though I felt the sting beneath her words. I nodded slightly, and for a moment her mask slipped. Her eyes hardened, a flash of irritation breaking through her polished act. She wanted to control everything, even me. That crack told me more than her smile ever could. Later, at the reception hall, I caught her again watching me from across the room. Her hand rested on Callum's arm, but her gaze was sharp, calculating. She wasn't just protecting her marriage, she was guarding her claim, as if she feared what my presence might unravel. Callum, on the other hand, was relentless. Every chance he got, he drifted near me, leaning close, whispering small pleas. He wanted to talk alone, wanted me to listen, wanted me to believe his story. He looked frantic beneath his calm exterior, his laugh too loud, his charm stretched thin. He followed me with his eyes as though I held the only key to his freedom. I found myself caught in their web, each tugging at me from opposite sides. Marissa wanted me silent, tucked away like an inconvenient secret. Callum wanted me involved, pulled back into his chaos. Neither cared what I wanted. As I watched them together, a thought settled over me with icy weight. Maybe they weren't so different after all. She wanted power. He wanted escape. And I was standing in the middle, the piece they both thought they could move to win their game. That realization burned deeper than any memory. It wasn't just the past that haunted me now. It was the present. They were still trying to shape my choices, still trying to twist me into their plans. But for the first time, I began to wonder which of them was the bigger danger, and how far they were willing to go to get what they wanted. The dinner was set up to look elegant, like something out of a glossy magazine. Long tables stretched across the hall, lined with tall candles, polished silverware, and glassware that caught the light with every flicker. Waiters moved silently, filling glasses as guests raised them for one toast after another. Laughter filled the room, but underneath it all, there was a nervous hum, as if people were pretending to enjoy themselves rather than truly celebrating. Callum sat at the center, his tie slightly undone, his smile too wide. He kept lifting his glass, drinking faster than anyone else, his cheeks growing redder with every pour. His words were louder than the rest, his laugh a little strained, but his eyes betrayed him. No matter how many conversations he joined, no matter how many people tried to engage him, his gaze found me again and again. I could feel it pressing against me like a weight I didn't ask to carry. Beside him, Marissa looked flawless, her gown flowing like liquid silk, her jewelry catching every glint of light. She played her role perfectly, nodding, smiling, thanking relatives for their kind words. But I caught it, the tension in her jaw, the quick flicker in her eyes whenever she saw where Callum's attention wandered. She didn't break character, not fully, but the cracks showed in the smallest ways. The moment turned when one of her cousins stood, glass in hand, and spoke about how Callum had finally found the right partner. Laughter rolled through the room, polite applause following, and that's when Marissa decided to strike. She turned her gaze toward me, her voice honeyed but sharp enough to cut. "Not everyone succeeds the first time," she said, her smile flawless. "Some unions are stepping stones, I suppose. A first draft before the real story begins." The words landed like a slap. The laughter that followed was light, but it carried an edge. Faces turned toward me, waiting to see how I would handle the insult dressed as a joke. Callum shifted uncomfortably in his chair, but kept his mouth shut, staring at his glass. I lifted mine, keeping my voice calm, steady. "You're right. I said, smiling as though I agreed. Some drafts get thrown away. But usually, it's because they reveal more truth than people are ready to face. Money might cover mistakes for a while, but it can't rewrite the story. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. A few guests exchanged looks, some hid smirks behind their hands. Marissa's smile froze, her eyes narrowing just enough for me to see the fury behind them. She recovered quickly, but the damage was done. The room no longer buzzed with easy laughter. It carried tension instead, heavy and unmistakable. From that moment, the party lost its shine. Conversations stumbled, the air thick with unease. The perfect mask Marissa wore had slipped, if only for a second, and everyone had seen it. I hadn't just answered her, I had declared war. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of wet grass after the sprinklers had passed over the lawn. I stepped outside for a breath, needing distance from the suffocating tension of the house. That's when I saw him, leaning against a stone pillar, a cigarette glowing between his fingers. His jacket was gone, his shirt untucked, his face flushed from too much wine. He noticed me and straightened, trying to pull himself together, but his movements were clumsy. "Lorraine," he said, his voice thick, "I needed you to come out here." His eyes were bloodshot, restless, searching me as though I held an answer to a question he couldn't form. I kept my distance, but he stumbled closer, smoke curling around him. Before I could speak, he reached out, his hand brushing against my arm, and then he tried to kiss me. The smell of alcohol hit me, strong and sour. I shoved him back. "Don't you dare," I snapped. "You don't get to touch me after everything you've done." His expression crumbled, desperation pouring out. "I still love you," he blurted. "I made mistakes, but it's always been you. You're the only one who understands me." His words tumbled out too fast, too messy to be rehearsed. I shook my head. "Love? You don't know the meaning of the word. You destroyed everything we had, and you didn't even hesitate." That was when his bravado broke completely. His hands trembled as he dragged them down his face. "You don't get it," he whispered. "Marissa, she made me sign a prenup. If I go through with this, everything I've worked for, everything I've built, it's gone. She'll own me. I can't get out of it." The truth hit me like a slap. This wasn't about me, not really. He wasn't begging for my heart. He wasn't trying to fix what he broke. He was terrified of losing his money, his lifestyle, the illusion he had wrapped himself in. The woman he had left me for wasn't just cruel. She was smarter than him, and he was only realizing it now. I looked at him, this man I had once given everything to, and saw nothing but weakness. He wasn't the confident charmer I had fallen for. He was a coward who wanted me to pull him out of a cage he had walked into on his own. "Then stay in it," I told him coldly. "You chose her. You chose this. Don't come crawling to me because you can't live with the consequences." His face twisted in anguish, but I didn't feel pity. I felt clarity. Whatever scraps of feeling I had left for him burned away in that moment. He wanted me to be his escape, his safety net. I refused. For the first time, I walked away without looking back, certain I would never save him again. Morning came with a storm of noise. The estate buzzed with staff rushing in and out, decorators fussing over flowers and relatives arguing about seating. Voices echoed through the halls, clipped and hurried. Everyone moved quickly, like they were afraid to be the one slowing things down. In the middle of it all stood Marissa. She was dressed hours before anyone else, her gown pressed to perfection, her makeup untouched by the chaos. She issued instructions with sharp precision, pointing at arrangements, scolding servers, directing photographers as though the day belonged entirely to her command. Her tone was sweet in front of guests, but her eyes gave her away, hard, impatient, intolerant of the smallest flaw. Callum was another story. He lingered near the back, his face pale, his tie crooked, a thin layer of sweat on his skin. He tried to smile at people passing, but the expression never lasted more than a second. His hands fidgeted constantly, straightening his cufflinks, tugging at his jacket, wiping his palms against his trousers. I caught him staring at me again, the same way he had the night before, a silent plea in his eyes. When the ceremony began, everyone filed into their seats, voices hushed, anticipation heavy. The aisle was covered in white petals, the air thick with perfume from the endless roses. The music swelled as Marissa entered, radiant under the soft lights, her veil trailing behind her like a banner of victory. Guests sighed, cameras flashed, and she walked with confidence, eyes fixed on her prize. Callum stood at the altar, his posture stiff, his smile strained. As she approached, his eyes flickered past her, locking on me again. I sat quietly, my hands folded in my lap, refusing to give him the response he wanted. He shifted slightly, his lips parting, and when she reached him, he leaned just enough to whisper words meant only for me. "Stop this," he murmured, almost broken. "Don't let me do it." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I let the silence answer for me, and the color drained further from his face. Marissa didn't notice. She was too busy lifting her veil, her smile wide for the guests, for the cameras, for the show. The officiant began the vows, the familiar words filling the air. Each sentence landed heavier than the last, pressing on Callum's shoulders. His eyes darted toward me again, begging for interruption, waiting for me to rise and rescue him from his own trap. But I stayed where I was still a stone. When it came time for him to speak, his voice cracked. He hesitated, glancing at me once more, but the silence stretched too long, and the crowd shifted uneasily. Finally, he forced the words out, shaky but audible. "I do." Applause filled the room, but Callum's face told another story. He had sealed his fate. Marissa gripped his hand triumphantly, beaming at their audience. And I remained silent, letting him drown in the choice he made. The reception glittered with chandeliers and overflowing glasses, but beneath the sparkle it felt hollow. Guests clapped, laughed, and posed for pictures, their joy rehearsed, their cheers stretched too thin. Waiters carried trays of champagne, the bubbles catching the light as though they could disguise the unease that lingered after the ceremony. Callum stood beside Marissa, his hand locked in hers, his smile no more than a shadow. He nodded at guests, accepted congratulations, even raised a glass in return, but I could see it. His eyes were vacant, his shoulders sagged. The more she clung to him, the smaller he seemed to become. Marissa's grip was tight, almost possessive, as if she wanted the whole room to know he belonged entirely to her. She whispered in his ear, guided him through conversations, even corrected his words once when he stumbled. Each moment chipped at the proud image he used to wear like armor. I stayed on the sidelines, sipping my drink, watching the performance unfold. There was a strange calm in me, as though the storm that once lived in my chest had finally blown itself out. The man who once held my whole world now looked like a figure on display, a puppet dressed in silk. Later, when the crowd shifted toward the dance floor, Marissa found me near the edge of the room. Her gown shimmered under the lights, her smile wide enough to cut glass. She leaned close, her perfume sharp, her voice a low whisper. "You shouldn't have come. You don't belong here." I tilted my head, letting my lips curve into a slow smirk. "Relax," I said softly. "He's yours." Every lying, cheating, broke piece of him. I wouldn't take him back if he begged. Her smile didn't vanish all at once. It cracked, just slightly, the corners trembling before she recovered. But I saw it, the brief flicker of doubt, the fear that I knew more than she wanted anyone to. Her eyes narrowed, though her lips stayed fixed in place for the guests still watching. As she turned back toward her new husband, I caught Callum's expression. His shoulders drooped, his gaze empty, and for a moment he looked straight at me. In that look was something raw, regret, recognition, and maybe even shame. He realized too late that the life he had chosen wasn't freedom or love. It was a gilded cage with Marissa holding the key. I didn't need to say anything more. Watching him sink beneath her control was enough. I felt no sympathy, no urge to intervene. Instead, a quiet satisfaction settled deep inside me. The man who once left me in ruins was now the one crumbling, and I was free to walk away untouched. I left the estate once the music grew louder and the crowd sank into their celebrations. The night sky stretched wide above me, quiet and cool, a stark contrast to the noise behind those glowing windows. Driving down the long road lined with oaks, I felt lighter with every turn of the wheels, as though the weight I had carried for years was finally slipping off my shoulders. There was a time when I would have done anything to shield Callum from pain. I would have fought for him, forgiven him, even begged him to stay. But that woman no longer existed. Sitting behind the wheel now, I could see the truth with clarity I had never known before. Callum wasn't a tragic man who lost his way. He was selfish, weak, and willing to destroy anyone who got in the way of what he wanted. For years, I had thought revenge meant action, some bold move to make him feel the pain he gave me. But tonight proved otherwise. My power came in silence, in refusal. I didn't save him. I didn't interrupt his vows. I didn't give him the comfort of believing I still loved him. Instead, I left him standing beside the very woman he chose, locked into a future he created with his own hands. That was the punishment, sharper than anything I could have said. As the estate lights disappeared in my rearview mirror, I realized I no longer cared what became of him. His life was no longer my burden. Whatever games he and Marissa played, whatever misery grew between them, it belonged only to them now. My part was finished. The road ahead was dark but open, stretching out into the unknown. For the first time in years, I felt free, not because I had won, but because I no longer needed to fight. I had walked away on my own terms. Callum could burn in the fire he lit, and I would never step back into the smoke. That night, I closed the chapter for good. Not with tears, not with rage, but with the steady strength of someone who finally knows her worth. And I didn't look back. Do you think I did the right thing by staying silent and letting Callum marry Marissa, or should I have stopped the wedding when he begged me to? I really want to know what you think. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy hearing my stories, make sure to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one.